Hello and welcome to a deck profile for Levidras for the standard format. This is an interesting mid-range deck that has a useful defensive effect, the ability to scale into the late game with these Infinity Eyes markers, back row attack, and lots of drop zone recursion, as well as a Vanguard that can gain crit on the Divine Skill turn. So it's got a lot of pluses in its favor. It hits decent numbers, not the best, but good enough. But it does have some glaring weaknesses. For one, Infinity Eyes markers do nothing to protect you from restanding Vanguards, so decks with a lot of Vanguard pressure are very dangerous. Two, you're kind of piece reliant. You need to find two specific cards in order to get 5 attacks. If you don't find them, you're only getting 4. And you take a little bit to get going. And when you're going first, you can only get at most 2 Infinity Eyes markers into play, and then you have to wait until Persona Ride to get the next 2. If you're going second, you can get 3 in play right away, but the downside of going second is that you're on the back foot for the entire game. So it's not going to be the most competitive deck by any means. I'm not saying that this is a secret tier 0 deck or anything. I'm just saying this deck is a little underrated and perfectly fine to take to your local tournament and play and have a great time doing so. Without any further ado, let's get into the actual deck profile. And we're starting with the Ride deck. You must play all 4 of these cards if you're going to play this Ride line. None of these are optional. However, you can substitute the 1 and the 2 for the Zorga Ride line, which will give you some additional card draw and some ability to discard stuff to the drop zone. And then pick it back up, because the grade 1 discards a normal order, and then the grade 2 picks a normal order back up. So it accomplishes a similar goal as this, but it churns through your deck a little bit more. But it requires you to play more orders than we're comfortable playing. So I'm playing this ride line right now, and this live ride line's pretty good. Starting off with our grade 0, Stag Nipper Dragon, just a typical D-era starter. And then Score Piercer Dragon, which if we have the grade 0 in the soul, we can ride the grade 2 for free. And then the grade 2, Mantis Scythe Dragon, says when this unit is rode upon by a grade 3 Levidras, you get to Energy Blast 3, look at the top 5 cards of the deck, and add 1 grade 3 or less card from among them to hand, and then shuffle the deck. You reveal it, of course. This is really good. This will help us find any pieces we're missing. It'll help us find Persona Ride. This ride line does become the automatic best ride line to play when we're on King Levidras in set 5. For now, it's still pretty good. And because we have a discounted ride line going from 1 to 2, we're incentivized to not play cyclers, so having another way to spend energy is really nice. And then lastly, we have Destined 1 of Infinity, Levidras, the big bug dragon himself. He has an act skill for Counterblast 1. You choose one of your R, one of the opponent's R, and you put an Infinity Eyes marker on both of those circles. Now, the Infinity Eyes markers themselves don't do anything, but the Vanguard has a skill that when a unit on an Infinity Eyes marker attacks or boosts, you can give it plus 10,000 or minus 10,000, and if it was the opponent's unit and you gave it minus 10, you can remove the marker and draw a card. So you get a nice bit of extra defensive power, shrinking your opponent's units hopefully into manageable numbers to guard. And then, as a Divine skill, you can Soul Blast 1 when your opponent's Vanguard is grade 3 or greater, and choose one of your R, one of their R, and put a marker on both. And then this unit gets plus 10k and a crit. So when we're going second, we can immediately Divine skill and get a total of 4 markers into play right away. And we'll be able to get the opponent's entire front row, which is really nice to help survive their Persona Ride turn. And we'll get crit and power on the Vanguard, which will hit for a nice number, very threatening. Going first, this doesn't actually do that much. We're only going to be mitigating one of the opponent's attacks, and then we're going to be only getting 1 marker on our side, so only one of our attacks will be good. So your first grade 3 turn is usually pretty underwhelming when you're going first, but it's still better to go first because you get to go into Twin Drive while the opponent's still on grade 2, and thus it's harder for them to pass the Vanguard. And then on top of that, you'll have more shield value when they go into their first grade 3 turn, and you'll be more likely to survive. So that's the Ride deck. Let's get into the main deck, starting with 3 copies of Persona Ride. Persona Ride is very important for this deck. We need to hit as much additional power as we can because we are not boosting in this deck, we are attacking from the back row. So our units will not be getting as much power as they would in a different kind of deck. And then next is our grade 2s, and we're starting with 4 copies of Onfall Anotogaster. This is a really important card for the deck, one of our most important pieces. When this is placed on R, if you have an Infinity Eyes marker in the same column, and remember, the opponent's side of the board counts as the same column, you can Energy Blast 3, look at the top 2 cards of the deck, add one to hand, put the other on the top or bottom, and then this unit gets 5k until end of turn. So we have the ability to potentially stack triggers to the top of the deck, which is really nice. And we're finding whatever card is the best out of the top two, which is nice in a deck that just wants to call a full board of units every single turn. So that's a really good effect. And then secondly, as a con skill, if we have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Levidras in its name, and we have 3 or more Infinity Eyes markers, this unit gets 5k. And if it's the only copy of itself in the back row, it can attack from the back row. So this is how we get our 5 attack pattern. And it's the fact that it's a free back row attack is really nice. So even if we brick, we can still generally get 4 attacks with this. Next is our recursion piece. Don't mind these 2 cards. They're proxies because 2 copies of this haven't come in the mail yet. This is Skulk Claw's Huntsman Hooli. On place, you counterblast 1 if you have an Infinity Eyes marker in the same column as this unit, and you choose a grade 3 or less unit from your drop zone, call to R, and then if there are 3 or more Infinity Eyes markers, this unit gets plus 10k. So this is how you rebuild your board after getting your stuff retired by your opponent's effects, and that'll help you constantly reapply pressure every single turn. And when you're going second, you can pick the cards that you discarded to ride and call them back to get some additional value. And you can do that right away on your first grade 3 turn because you can use the Divine skill to make sure you have the 3 markers. And then next we have Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea. This is, in other card games, we would call this a French vanilla unit. This is a unit that has no effects aside from increasing its own power. When you play a normal order this turn, it gets 5k. If your unit was placed from drop this turn, it gets 5k. And then when this unit attacks, if it's the 4th battle or more, this unit gets 5k. So it can total up for plus 15, becoming a 25k, which is really good. On an Infinity Eyes marker, it'll be a 35, and then if we have the benefit of Persona Ride, that's 45, which hits over 30k shield, which is 2 trigger guard, which is really nice. And then if it's, we can get that not just from Persona Ride, but also from choosing it for a Foxhill skill. So it's pretty easy to get that 45, and that generally makes this our best attacker. Another thing to note is that we're a 5 attack deck. And thus, if you get more than 2 copies of this, the 3rd copy and on are going to be suboptimal. It's impossible to attack in the 4th or more battle more than twice with this deck. So the first copy of this will always have the 3rd effect, and the second copy can be the 4th battle exactly, but the 3rd copy and on are just going to be dead weight. Next up is our grade 1s, and we're starting with 4 copies of Full Knowledge Foxhill. This is a special booster, specifically for the Vanguard. It's a 13k booster if we have a grade 3 Levidras Vanguard, but then when it boosts Levidras specifically, it becomes a 15k booster. And then if we have an Infinity Eyes marker on the opponent's side of the field, we can counterblast 1, choose a back row rear guard, and give it plus 10,000 and the ability to attack from the back row. So with 1 on-fall Anotogaster in 1 back row circle, and something like Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea in the other back row rearguard circle, we can get 5 attacks, and all of them will be decent numbers. Important thing to note is that skill costs Counterblast, and Levidras' skill to put markers on the opponent's side of the field also costs Counterblast, unless you use Divine skill. That means it costs generally 2 Counterblast in order to get the marker on the opponent's side and to activate the Foxhill. So it's a steep cost to get the 5 attack pattern. We can mitigate this because the next card I'm about to show you is a countercharger, which helps a lot. But it can lead to very niche scenarios where the correct play is to not activate the Infinity Eyes marker on the opponent's side when they attack or boost, if you can survive the turn normally. Because then we can avoid paying Counterblast for the Vanguard skill and still get access to Foxhill in events that we don't have enough CB to do everything. Next up is our Countercharger. This is 4 copies of Knight of Silent Illusion Clarence. When this unit attacks or boosts, if it's in the same column as an Infinity Eyes marker at the end of the battle, you put it into Soul and countercharge 1 if you haven't countercharged this turn. So it's a once per turn countercharger, which is not that big a deal. We don't generally want to play multiple of these in the same turn anyways. It countercharges on boost, which means we can use it on our first grade 3 turn when we're not getting back row attack. And the fact that it countercharges on attack is really nice because when we have a full board of back row attack, we're still getting the effect, unlike a card like Bulb Mine, which has to boost. So this is a really good card, and it also encourages us to play draw triggers over fronts for one very specific pattern. In the event that you don't have Counterblast at the beginning of your battle phase, and you have Clearance, the only way to countercharge before swinging with your Vanguard and thus boosting with Foxhole to get the back row attack would be to swing with this in the front row, because there's no way you can attack on the back row until after Foxhole boosts, but you're not on the Counterblast to activate that. So it has to go to the front row and it has to attack, which with Persona Ride and on an Infinity Eyes marker will be a nice 28k attack, which isn't that big a deal, but it will put itself to soul, meaning that when your Vanguard swings, you will only have 2 front row units, and the Vanguard, especially on the Divine Skill turn, but in general, because it's our most threatening attack, is the most likely candidate for getting perfect guarded by the opponent. And that means your front trigger is really only benefiting 1 unit, because a perfect guarded unit might as well have 0 power. It can never hit. So with the front trigger just being a give a single unit 10k effect, essentially in our deck, it's kind of at its weakest. And that incentivizes us to play draws, because if we're going to only get a trigger that gives 10k to one thing, it might as well be a draw trigger, which will then draw us a card. Now, the edge between the 2 trigger types is really narrow, so it's not that big a deal if you want to play fronts. And now let's get into the order package. We have 4 copies of Spiritual Body Condensation. This has a cost of Soul Blast 1, and you choose a card with a grade equal to or less than your Vanguard from your drop zone, call it to R, give it 5k until end of turn. So this, combined with Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea, is a really good early pressure combo. You can discard this to your first ride to go from 0 to 1, and then on turn 2, you can play this order to call the Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea to R from the drop, and it'll get +5 from playing a normal order, +5 from calling a unit from the drop, and then 5k from condensation, becoming a 25k attacker on turn 2, which hits over 15k shield on grade 1 or grade 2. So it gives you a lot of good early pressure, really incentivizes the opponent to not guard, and especially if you can boost your grade 2 Vanguard with a copy of Foxhole, that'll be 18k, which means that a 15k shield is 1 to pass, which means the opponent is really incentivized to not guard anything on your grade 2 turn if you get that combo, which means you'll be able to push them up damage, and if you hit a crit, you'll be able to push them up a lot of damage, which is really nice. And then next we have 2 copies of Mythiarch Habitat. This, when you play it, you look at the top 7 cards of the deck, choose which 1 unit card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard, call to R, and shuffle the deck, and then has a con skill. When you would search or choose a unit card from the deck, you can choose this card. And then when you would call this card from deck to R, you put it in your hand instead of the drop. So the main use of this is just to dig through the deck to try to find the important pieces when we don't have them. An interesting interaction is that if you have this card, and then you call Huli off of Mythiarch Habitat, Huli will then call a card from the drop, and you'll get all the effects of your Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea with 1 card. The other order can also set that up, because it'll be a normal order and call a card from the drop, so it's pretty easy to get the full plus 15k on this unit, as long as you're playing correctly. And then next up we have our Perfect Guards, 3 normal unit PGs, 1 Elementaria. Not much else to say. This Elementary is the best perfect card in the game, and PGs are good. And next we have 1 copy of Protection Twincast. We're playing 6 normal orders, so we're kind of disincentivized from playing normal order Regalis pieces, like the Persona Ride Cup, or Radiance Caliburn, or Bracing Angel Ladder. You can easily just play Bracing Angel Ladder in this spot. If you're expecting to see Shiranui, it's fine. But if you're not, then this card is slightly better at helping you survive against things like Shoujo Doji, so it's really good. And we can discard this to ride and not care, because we can then remove it and get a 15k shield out of the deal, so it always generates some amount of value. But we're generally encouraged to play a Blitz Order Regalis piece, and this one is slightly better than Evergreen Transfer. And then next up is our triggers. We have 4 vanilla heals. The best deck in the format is Shoujo Doji. Shoujo Doji is not affected by any of the effect heals, so there's no incentive to play those heals over the vanilla ones, which will always be a 15k shield. You can still play 1 or 2 of them if you want. It's fine. And then we have our crits, 4 effect crits. Aspiring Maiden Alana. This is completely unimportant. You can just play vanilla crits if you want. I like the art on the effect crit, so I'm playing 4 of them. And then we have 4 vanilla crits to go with our 4 effect crits. Play whatever art you like. You can even play 8 vanilla crits, as I said. It really doesn't matter. Just, you want to be playing 8 crits, because this deck doesn't benefit as much from fronts as other decks. The crits will give you the most amount of kill pressure. And then we have 3 effect draws, Serene Maiden Lena. This is, as I stated before, I like this slightly more than fronts for a common attack pattern we run into. These will draw your card when you hit them defensively, so they give you a slightly better chance of surviving. We're shrinking the opponent's units, so often the 10k shield is fine because we're giving stuff minus 10k, so a minus 10k and a draw trigger is kind of like guarding with a front. And these will help you dig for pieces when you drive check them. So overall, I like them a little bit more than fronts. But you can play fronts, it's fine. The edge between the two is very narrow. And then we have 1 Source Dragon Deity of Blessings, Bless Favor. This is the Stoicheia over trigger. When you drive check it, it gives you 1 of every trigger effect, a crit, a heal, a draw, and a front. And then it gives you 100 million. So it's a big tempo swing when you hit this card. But unlike other over triggers that are all about the big tempo swing, this one, it's fine if we don't kill the opponent on the turn we check it, because healing and then drawing 2 total from its other effect, and then putting a lot of power on the board, eating a lot of cards of the opponent's hand, means that often this will put us in a comfortable position to win the long game, even if the opponent survives the initial onslaught of the over trigger. It's one of the better over triggers in my opinion, so I think you should play this one. So that's the deck. Important things to note, when you activate the Vanguard skill and you get an Infinity Eyes marker, 1 on your side, 1 on their side, you should, generally speaking, put them in opposite columns on the first activation. This way, whenever a unit checks the column it's in to see if there's an Infinity Eyes marker, it will see a marker no matter where you put it. And the only card we want to put behind the Vanguard is Foxhill, so it's fine that we don't have one in this column. Another thing to note is that as you get into the mid-game, you activate your Divine Skill and you get a board with more markers, it's better to put the additional markers on the back row, in my opinion. The back row is not gaining the benefit of Persona Ride, and so this will help you hit more units with magic numbers if you've Persona Rode this turn than otherwise you'd be able to. Another thing is, if you can't get the full 5 attacks, you can double a marker in a column, and then you can attack boosted with Clarence, your countercharger, and then any unit in the front. And this will be a pretty big attack. It'll be plus 20 before any other effects. So that'll help you get some much needed pressure in the event that you can't get 5 attacks. But let's see what an example board would look like on a Divine Skill turn. We would have 1 copy of Foxhill behind the Vanguard. We're going to try to get 1 copy of Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea, probably here so that it can attack from the back row. We'll assume, because it's Divine Skill turn, that we have Persona Ride. We can call 1 copy of this to the front so that we can get the counter charge, and it'll be attacking for 28 on Persona. We can have a single copy of Onfall and Odogaster, and then we can have Huli in the last spot. It'll be attacking for a nice 30. But it doesn't have to be Huli. It could be another copy of Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea. That's going to come down to whether we were able to play an order in order to call something from the drop this turn. But let's say it's Huli. And let's say we played Mythiarch Habitat to find the Huli to call a card from drop. So assuming this is a Persona Ride turn with Divine Skill, our turn looks something like this. The Vanguard is getting 10k from the Divine Skill. This card is getting 10k from Persona Ride, and then 10k from the Infinity Eyes marker. This unit is going to get 5k from playing an order, 5k from a card being called from the drop, and then 10k from the Infinity Eyes marker. And then it'll get another 10k from being chosen to be able to attack from the back row by Foxhill. And then when it finally attacks in the 4th or more battle, it'll get another 5k. Then Huli will be getting 10k from its own effect when you call it, and then 10k from Persona Ride. If we play this Odogaster this turn, it's getting plus 5, and then plus 10 from the marker. But if we played it, this turn, it's getting plus 10 from its own effects, 10 from the marker. And then if we played it previous turn, it's getting 5k less, making it a 25k, which is fine. If we give it a trigger, it's now hitting for 35k, which will hit over a front trigger guard. So let's assume we played this last turn to set up. So our board looks something like this. This unit is going to be a 15k booster. It's going to get 2k from its second effect and 5k from its first effect. So we have this setup. The Vanguard's getting 10k from Persona Ride, 10k from Divine Skill, as I mentioned. This is what our board looks like. We swing Vanguard first if we have CB available, and if not, we swing Clarence first to get the counter charge. So we get this. We used if we didn't use this turn, we don't know what the top card is. But otherwise, if we played this turn, then we have checked the top card of the deck and added one hand and put one to the top or bottom. So we're slightly more likely to hit triggers. We're probably going to hit at least one trigger this turn. This is a 33 plus 15 for 48, which means the opponent needs to guard for 35k shield just to match the number, and then they need another 15 on top of that to 2 to pass it. And because we stacked a trigger to the top, if we hit 2 triggers, they're probably just going to die because this also has additional crit. But in the event that this doesn't hit, we decide to put the trigger somewhere else. If we played this last turn, this becomes a good candidate. This card can then become a 35. We can swing here for this 35. We can swing for this 28 before that, actually. So we swing for the 28, put this into soul, countercharge, swing this 35, swing this this nice little 30 here, and then this we can swing for 20, 35, 45, which will be a really good number, hitting over 2 triggers to guard, which is really nice. And all these attacks, if sequenced correctly, we did a 48, a 28, a 30, a 35, a 45. Everything here took at least 2 cards to guard or a front trigger to guard. This is the smallest attack at 28, which hits exactly enough to get over a 15k shield guard. So assuming we ate 2 cards, because this got perfect guarded every single attack, we took 10 cards out of the opponent's hand, or they had to take some damage. More likely, they probably took about half of these, and we got probably something like 6 cards out of their hand. But we also, if we did Divine Skill, put a marker on their entire front row. So on their turn, we're going to remove 2 markers when they attack with these units. We're going to draw 2 cards, plus we have the 2 cards from our drive check, and we're going to potentially have enough shield value to survive because their numbers are going to be smaller. And then on the next turn, we just basically do this again. Even if we don't hit Persona Ride, it's fine, because we'll just activate our Vanguard skill again. We'll get another marker here and another marker on their side, and this will be gone. And we'll just find whatever unit we need to call to this spot. It could be this or something like that. If we Persona Road, great. If not, it's fine. We're probably intercepted with this. We're probably doing something like calling another Anotogaster, because we've only seen 1 at this point, presumably on turn 4, and now it's turn 5. We've probably found another copy. This will check the top of the deck. We can actually swap these if we have Persona Ride, and the numbers will be better. But if not, then we can leave it like this, where this is getting 15. This will be getting 20, and more if it's Persona Ride. Again, if we played an order to call any of these cards, these Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Seas can be really big. Overall, we can hit for, if we get double Devouring Arm of the Crumbling Sea, and we have Persona Ride, then 10k for Zone Effect, 10k for the marker, 10 for Persona Ride. This is hitting for 40. These are hitting for 45s. This is, even without Divine Skill, if we have Persona Ride, it's still a 38, which is a really good number. And then this is still a 25. It was the smallest number, but still respectable. And any triggers will make this up to a 35. A second trigger will make it up to a 45. So it'll hit over guarding everything. So overall, even without, and even if we take away 10k power from the Persona Rides, these are still decent numbers. This is still 35. This is still 45. This is still 25. We're still hitting for great numbers. This is still hitting for 20, which is the worst number of the lot, but still pretty good. Oh, sorry. No, it's actually more. It's 10k from both its effects and then 10k from the marker. I took away too many dice. So this is still hitting for 30, which is still hitting over a 15k shield. So even without Persona Ride, because we get 4 markers, things are looking okay. And even if we can't get the full setup, let's say we don't find a Notogaster for whatever reason, we can still do something like this, where we can call a Clarence to one side. We can have one of these in the back row. And then we can have something like a Huli that stuck around from the previous turn. Or we play a Huli this turn and we call something for the back row. So in this, let's say we played an order and called a Huli with it, and then the Huli called the Devouring Arm, the Crumbling Sea. So the Huli will be plus 10k from a marker. Let's assume this is a Persona Ride turn, for argument's sake. So the front row is 10k. This is getting plus 10k from playing out of order and calling a thing from drop. This is getting plus 10k. This swing will give this the ability to attack from back row and give it another 10k. And we can go 1 battle, 2 battle, 3 battle, 4 battles, and this will still get its plus 15, and will be 25, 35, 45. Another 10k for the marker, just show it with dice. And then this is getting 10k from the marker. So we can have something like this, where the final attack is hitting for 25, 35 for Persona, 45, 53. And while this is a 4-attack turn, it's still pretty threatening numbers. Everything is hitting for like a good value that requires multiple cards to guard. And then we'll end this with countercharge, which will set us up for the next turn. So there's a lot of intricacies with this deck's attack patterns, with where you put your markers. Like I said, as you can see, it's often better to put them in the back row because the back row attacks can get to pretty good numbers if you do so. Where you put it on the opponent's side is going to matter a lot. Generally, it's just going to be to both front row circles, but eventually you're going to only have one marker and you're going to figure out which of your opponent's units is more important. You can technically stack up markers, but stacking up markers on your own side has no benefit because Levidras triggers once when a unit attacks or boosts. It gives a 10k, and the markers themselves don't actually do anything. So if you attack with a unit on a doubled up marker, Levidras checks, did a unit on a marker attack or boost? If yes, give it 10k or minus 10k. It doesn't count the number of markers. It does not say for each marker on that circle. It just says give it plus 10k or minus 10k until end of battle. However, if you stack markers on the opponent's side of the field, the benefit of doing this is if the opponent has a restander or has a card or has a Vanguard that calls to circles again after the Vanguard swing, you can get to activate this twice on the same circle over the course of a game, which can, against restanders, can buy you a lot of additional shield value, essentially, because you'll be giving minus 20 overall. So if the opponent has one unit in particular that's more threatening, having doubled up markers to stop an attack on that column twice can be really good. So you'll have to balance that with the value of just going one to each circle in the front row and making those smaller. Sometimes you can also go to a back row booster if that matters. There's not really a scenario where that's going to come up. It's usually just better to go with the front row. And it's often worth it to activate the markers, even if you plan on no guarding the attack, just because you'll get some additional card draw. But the benefit to not activating the markers is that you can then avoid activating the Vanguard skill and save yourself 1 CB and just activate Foxhill to get the back row attack. But because we get a marker on our side, we generally do just want to activate the Vanguard skill. So it's a really narrow case of that you do that. It's not going to happen very often. Another, I don't remember if I mentioned this, but a niche little interaction you can do is if your opponent is Shiranui and they dominate one of your units on a circle with markers, and they attack your Vanguard, you can remove the marker and give that unit minus 10k, and because it's your opponent's unit while it's dominated, you will remove the marker and draw a card. And so that is a one way to survive a little bit more against Shiranui, because most dominate units will be about 10k shield, so giving them minus 10k will stop the attack from hitting, which can be the difference between life and death. Other things to note, it's a really niche interaction, but if you're trying to damage deny the opponent, and you have like a random unit behind your Vanguard, this is basically never going to happen, but it might happen with King Levidras a bit more often. But you can do something like this, where you swing boosted, and then you give your own unit minus 10k to drop your Vanguard down to 11. And then if you're trying to damage deny them, this will make this attack not hit. And if you have another unit over here, any triggers you hit can go over here so that this attack won't hit. And that'll let you damage deny while still getting drive checks. However, the case where you're going to actually do that is almost non-existent in the set 4 meta. That's really a technique you're going to have to remember for King Levidras. And I will be making a King Levidras video. I haven't decided if I'm going to wait till I have the cards in my hand, or if I'm just going to wait till we're closer to set 5, and I'm going to do a deck log screen capture to show that video off. But that's pretty much it for now for Levidras. I think this deck is really fun. I think it has a lot of interesting little puzzle-solving type gameplay. And the fact that it gets this inevitability win condition of just getting a bunch of markers into play and all your numbers become hard to deal with is really nice. Another nice thing is this deck almost never decks out. So if you hate losing to deck out, I have yet to deck out with this. I think this deck is really fun. I think this artwork of Levidras is way better than King Levidras, so I'm enjoying it while it lasts until I have to switch over to the ugly King Levidras art. But that's all I have for now on this deck. I hope you think this is interesting and you go out and play this yourself. I guess one last thing I'll say before I go is that a surprising amount of this deck is going to carry over to King Levidras. Anotogasters will carry over. You'll still be playing 4 copies of the Vanguard. You'll still be playing 3 to 4 copies of Foxhill. You'll still be playing 4 copies of Hooli. All of that is going to carry over, and some versions of the deck are playing 1 to 2 of the Countercharger. I think maybe there was even one guy who's playing 3 Counterchargers. And I think Twin Cast still carries over. So that is going to be a minimum of 4, 8, 12, 16 cards that are going to carry over, and a potential couple more, and that's not counting any triggers or perfect cards. So a lot of this deck is going to come over. To King Levidras, you need to put copies of Levidras Missile, so you have to play 4 of this. So you have a surprising amount of cards that you're going to need to get anyways if you plan to play King Levidras, but if you get them now, you can play this deck, and it's fun, and I like it. So keep that in mind. That's it for today. As always, good luck card fighting.